Hey guys, welcome back. Got a nice spot down here by the water today. Very peaceful. Which is ironic because the movie we're covering today is called Rage, which is kind of the opposite of peaceful. But we'll get into that. But the first thing I wanted to discuss today is someone who I believe is a very important man in American history. And his name is Nick Cage. Maybe you've heard of him. Now, Nick, he's done a lot of great things. He's also done a lot of not so great things. He's had his ups and downs, but, I think he's admirable and he's a very courageous man, I believe. And, I don't know if y'all remember, but old Nick, he was down bad for a while. He eventually had a career resurgence. Here lately, he's been in movies with Pedro Pascal and some other people that put him back on the map. But before that, things were tough. He was doing the washed up action hero thing where he made about 3,000 straight to streaming movies, and all of them have slight variations, but at the end of the day, they're all basically the same movie. However, one of those 3,000 movies stood out, and it was a movie called Rage. And just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'm going to go ahead and provide you with the definition of rage. Now, rage can be a noun, which means violent, uncontrollable anger, or it can be a verb, which means to feel or express violent, uncontrollable anger. And I think that's important because it kind of gives you an idea of what we're in for with this straight to streaming Nick Cage classic. So let's jump right into it here. The movie starts, and the first thing you'll notice is that Nick Cage has opted to spray paint a helmet of hair directly onto his head. It's either that or he voluntarily went to a dye factory and had himself inverted into a vat of dye. Um, and it's unfortunate because he's a good looking man and, there's no need to do something like that. Um, but I get it. We all wig out about our looks every now and then. And, Nick was going through a rough patch, so I won't give him too hard of a time about it. But anyway, we learned that Nick is a real estate developer, and he goes to dinner with some potential business partners, and they talk about how they gonna go ahead and develop some real estate. And while that's going on, Nick's teenage daughter, Caitlin, is staying at home. And before Nick and his wife leave the house, they tell her, um, very clearly, they say, do not get in trouble while we're at this important dinner. Okay? And unfortunately, she doesn't do a very good job of that because as soon as they leave, three goons break into the house and she gets kidnapped. So basically, she messed up and disobeyed her parents. But anyway, when Nick and his wife return and find that Caitlin has gone missing, Nick's wife freaks out and tells him that he has her permission to go absolutely nuclear to get her back. Okay? She says, do whatever you need to do. You got my full support. And Nick, he takes a moment to think about that and he turns to her and very thoughtfully, he says, does that mean that butt stuff is now on the table? Because I tell you what, it would really help with my motivation and energy as far as getting Caitlin back. So, what do you think about that? And she doesn't answer. She turns and leaves. So, that only increases his rage. And maybe that was her play the whole time because now Nick is ready to go. And in order to go fully nuclear, Cage reveals that he is a former high-level mobster who still has ties to the mob, and he gets his old crew back together, which consists of two old guys. And I don't really know how things work in the mob, but these two old guys are immediately ready to go. Okay, they are hyped. So Cage and his crew are getting everything together to go nuclear. And around that time, the cops call and inform Cage that Caitlin's dead. Okay, they found her body. Which kind of throws a wrench into the whole bringing her back alive thing. But anyway, the cops share that she was shot by a Russian handgun. And they ask if Cage's past might point toward the Russian mob potentially being involved. To which Cage replies that there is no possibility of that whatsoever. He says, absolutely not. Okay, I've gone legit. I've been out of the mob. There is no way the Russians would have anything to do with me anymore. And the cops are satisfied with that, so they leave. And immediately after, Cage and his crew of the two old mobsters, they form a 3-man army and start going around town attacking random Russian mob hangouts and killing as many Russian mobsters as they possibly can. And at one point during this rampage, Cage runs down a guy that might know something, and once he catches him, he proceeds to slam his head on the ground, yelling at him, "Who did it? Who did it?" And unfortunately, the man dies due to what I suspect to be massive head trauma. And it isn't long until word starts getting around town about the chaos that Cage and his crew are causing. So the police chief meets with Cage personally, and they sit down and have a chat where they lay all their cards on the table. And the chief admits to Cage that his crew is too powerful for the police force to stop. Okay, Cage's crew, they've got brass knuckles, they've got some dull knives, and they've got a vast array of adult diapers to choose from. So their operation is like a well-oiled machine. However, the chief says that if Cage and his crew don't cut it out, he's going to call in the National Guard to stop their asses. And Cage isn't exactly intimidated by this whole demonstration, and he says, "Listen, copper, you do whatever you need to do, but these Russians, they smoked my damn daughter, so I'm going nuclear, and if that includes cop killing, I ain't exactly opposed." So he leaves, and he and his crew continue raiding and killing the Russian mobsters. And while they're killing the mobsters, their MO is basically to kill everyone in the building and then get mad that the dead bodies won't give them any information. So they continually raid these buildings, kill all the Russian mobsters, and then they'll throw the corpses around to try to get some intel, but it just doesn't work out. And while this is going on, eventually the Russian mob gets mad enough that they send 10 of their own goons to attack Cage's crew. And even though the police said it was impossible to stop this 3-man army that Cage has assembled, the Russian mobsters easily walk in, knock out, and capture one of Cage's buddies. So just like that, 33% of his crew is gone. And like I said, what the local police force and the National Guard were not able to accomplish is easily achieved by 10 Russian gangsters with the collective IQ of a panda bear. And listen, I got nothing against pandas, okay? I would never say anything bad about them. But if you've observed them, then you'd probably agree, and, we have to admit that they ain't the brightest. As cute as they are, I love me some panda bears, but anyhow, back to the movie. Cage, he pursues the Russians in his 2000s base trim Mustang, um, which I guess is all this movie could afford. And while he's pursuing the Russians, the cops pursue him, and the whole thing gets out of control, okay? The cops are crashing all over the place. The cop cars are exploding, and these noble policemen are dying left and right. And it climaxes with Cage slamming into a cop car just as he's about to stop the kidnappers. And instead of being injured from this catastrophic collision, Cage immediately steps out of the vehicle unscathed, and he is pissed. Okay, he walks up to the police chief and he's like, man, what the hell? You guys just fucking blew it. And bizarrely, the police chief sympathizes with Nick. He comes up to him and he starts whispering so the other cops can't hear, and he says, listen, man, I understand you crew's down bad. And that's tough, okay? It's tough to lose your crew. And, in my opinion, the Russian mob, they're the bad guys, all right? But you, Nick, you the American mob, okay? And the American mob, in many ways, are actually good. So, despite you accidentally killing a couple of my copper buddies, I'm gonna let you go, because I like you, Nick. You're an American hero. So why don't you go on your way and see this thing through to the end? So Nick bails out and goes back to his little safe house, where his remaining crew member is hanging out. And when he gets there, he learns that the Russians that he just let escape proceeded to torture and kill his buddy. And when he learns that, he becomes unhinged, okay? He confronts the remaining crew member and yells at him for not picking up his cell phone to help, because the guy was too busy partying with some cheap booze and strippers to bother trying to catch the kidnappers. And in fact, Nick becomes so unhinged that he whips out a knife and stabs the remaining crew member and kills him. So here, let me go over a list of the people left in Nick's crew. Okay, this is the roster here of who remains. Nicolas Cage. That's the end of the list. So the Greek tragedy of rage is almost at an end, because Nick's all alone now, and things only get worse when a bombshell plot twist drops in his lap. The police chief calls him and reveals that Caitlin was never kidnapped. They learned that she invited some teenage boys over to party. They got drunk, and they started playing with guns. And they proceeded to play a game of spin the pistol, and Caitlin lost. The boys freaked out and they dumped the body. So, never was no Russian mob involvement. And this whole rampage he and his 3-man army went on, it was pointless. And after sharing that, the police chief also says that Cage is actually under arrest now, because he's decided that given the new context of the situation, the activities he and his goons perpetrated was in fact illegal. So Cage isn't exactly thrilled to hear about this, so he slams the phone down, slams the landline down, and hangs up. And his mind is absolutely blown. He can't make sense of what just happened. But it doesn't really matter anyway, because pretty much as soon as he hangs up the phone, the Russian mob has sent a goon squad to his house, and they open the bedroom door and blast him to smithereens with a bunch of shotguns. And that's how it ends, with Nick Cage getting turned into a steaming pile of hamburger. And I think it's important for us to try to learn some lessons from Rage. I think there are some lessons that can be learned from this film. And the first one is that if you've ever thought about attacking the Russian mob, I would encourage you to consider, is it worth it? Okay. In all likelihood, it's probably not. You should probably not attack the Russian mob. Another thing that I think we can learn from this film is that it's generally a good practice to ask some questions before making life-altering decisions. For instance, if the police say your daughter was killed by a Russian handgun, does that mean that it was the Russian mob? Or if I go nuclear and destroy the Russian mob, will that bring my loved one back? Also, if I have an amazing marriage to a beautiful woman and I go on a nuclear rampage, will that potentially end my marriage or lower my life expectancy? Another key takeaway for me is the idea that if you get away with murder, you should maybe consider stopping. Getting away with murder is not an easy thing to do in and of itself. Getting away with multiple murders and having the police chief say they're willing to sweep it under the rug, that might be an indication you should quit while you're ahead. And lastly, and potentially the most important lesson here, is that in case you weren't aware, dead bodies and or corpses cannot answer questions. So if you need to get information, you're going to have to ask someone that's actually alive. And I think things would have turned out a lot better for Nick and his crew if they had been aware of that. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for Nick Cage's Rage. I didn't know if y'all remembered that one. Probably didn't, because it was straight to streaming. But if you like remembering stuff with me, you can hit the button down there to check in when I talk about some other stuff. But anyway, I appreciate y'all being here, and I'll talk to you again soon.